Hello and welcome to the weddings module for the local pastor's licensing school. My name is Wade Giffen. I am an elder in the West Ohio Conference, and I have served in a variety of appointments, from local church appointments to also being on the conference staff. It is good to be able to be with you today for this module. Interestingly enough, I have been appointed to a number of churches that have seemed to be the wedding chapel of that local community, which means that I have officiated a lot of weddings. As a matter of fact, at the last count, I am over 400 couples that I have officiated their service. So I've learned a few things along the way and hope that I can pass some of that information on to you. To help you during this module, it will be important for you to have a number of items on hand, and so I'm going to show you what those are now. And if you don't already have those together, I just invite you to pause the video, go gather those up, and we will get started. A couple of things. One is the United Methodist Book of Worship. This will be a great resource in your weddings. Secondly is the United Methodist hymnal. The hymnal is useful in that it does have a copy of the wedding service in it, but it also has a few other things that are helpful around hymns that might be sung or music during the service. This resource right here is a copy of the current wedding policy that we have at Trinity, the church I'm currently serving. And I'll talk about having an appropriate wedding policy for your church a little bit later today. So you'll want to have the sample policy out for when we get to that. Another sheet that you should have available to you is a list of suggested scriptures for the wedding ceremony. One of the questions always asked is, what are the scripture readings? What are appropriate? And this list will give you a way to start. Of course, there's always those favorites that come out, but this will help you expand that a little bit. And the final resource you will have that you will want to have available is the Service of Marriage Planning Worksheet. This will help us as we talk about the actual service itself. So if you don't have all those resources, as I have invited you to before, just pause this video, grab those up, and we will get started. All right, you ready? Let's talk about weddings. So as we begin to talk about weddings, we all know that people can get married by a variety of people in a variety of places. They can get married at a courthouse by a judge. They can get married by their local mayor if that person has the proper credentials to do that. But people can also be married in the church. And what makes getting married in the church unique and distinct is that what we officiate are what we call Christian marriage, Christian weddings. They are in the context of a worship service. One of the things I always make sure that I talk with each couple about is that distinction, that what we are engaged in is first and primarily a service of worship, but secondly, it is a special kind of worship service in which we will celebrate and solemnize a marriage and begin their marriage journey. And so I want to talk a little bit right here at the front about what is Christian marriage. You know, those are two words, Christian and marriage. And the first word, Christian, is an adjective. And as we think about how that fits in the definition of Christian marriage, we say that Christian means pertaining to or derived from Jesus Christ. We say that it's pertaining to, believing in, or belonging to a religion based on the ministry of Jesus, of or pertaining to Christians, exhibiting a spirit proper to a follower of Jesus Christ. And so what that does is it uniquely grounds what we're doing in the practice of the Christian faith. The second word in that definition is the word marriage, and that's a noun. And that is a definition of that is a social institution under which a man and woman establish their decision to live together as husband and wife by legal commitments, religious ceremonies, etc. The legal or religious ceremony that formalizes the decision of two people to live as a married couple, including all kinds of social festivities. And so the marriage, the wedding itself is the event, and the marriage is the life that follows after that. So as we think about the reality that the church is engaged in these services of marriage or these wedding services, what does it mean when the church endorses, participates in, or maintains a view of Christian marriage? This is where you will find yourself in a unique situation. The pastor agrees to officiate a marriage, a wedding. And when we do that, the unique situation we're in is we're actually playing a dual role. One of them is that we are serving as a servant of the state. And I'm in the state of Ohio. So what that means is that I, by agreeing to do weddings, am a servant of the state of Ohio. I am doing something on behalf of the state. It's a legal kind of thing. We become a legal representative, ensuring that all the proper procedures are carried out and the legal protections of marriage can be confirmed and maintained. This is an agreement that we have with the state of Ohio that makes a wedding, or then the marriage that follows, legal in the state. So you're a servant of the state. The second role that we are playing is that we are a servant of the church. And as a servant of the church, we are making theological claims about the nature of marriage and the church's role in affirming and solemnizing the marriage covenant between a husband and a wife. So sometimes we find ourselves in this little bit of tension between being a servant of the state and being a servant of the church, but we are doing both of those at the same time. We'll say a little bit more later on about how to make sure that you connect with the state that you are officiating weddings in, and a little more about what it means to be a pastor in that role. So what does the United Methodist Church say about marriage? Well, one of the things I want to refer you to is the book of worship. You will find the service of marriage, which we call Services of Christian Marriage, begins at page 115. Now, I'm not going to read this to you, but we'll leave it to your reading as a part of this module. On page 115 and spilling over to 116, you will see rubrics that are written with red ink. And essentially, that begins the discussion around Christian marriage and the United Methodists' participation and understanding of that. So please read this over as a really good introduction to what we are about when we officiate weddings. A couple of highlights from that is that we say that Christian marriage is proclaimed as a sacred covenant. And that sacred covenant reflects the baptismal covenant. We say that the covenant of marriage was established by God, who created us for each other. There's an example of that when we see the presence and power that Jesus brought when he graced a wedding in Cana of Galilee very, very early on in his earthly ministry. And we are reminded that in Jesus' sacrificial love, that Jesus gave us the example of the love of husband and wife. So you'll find that to be very helpful as you begin to frame your own understanding of your role and the church's role in as we do these weddings. In the United Methodist Book of Discipline, there are things that you will find there that will define the pastor's role in a wedding. And here are a couple of the things that I think are really important for us to remember. The responsibilities and duties of elders and licensed pastors. It says this: to perform the wedding ceremony after due counsel with the parties involved and in accordance to the laws of the state. Did you hear our two roles right there in that definition? A servant of the state and a servant of the church. In accordance, it says, with the laws of the state and the rules of the United Methodist Church. The other thing that is a part of the definition of our role is that the decision to perform the ceremony is the right and the responsibility of the pastor. What that means is that you as pastor have complete decision control over who you will marry and will not marry. And I will say that in my years of ministry, there have been couples that I have not agreed to officiate their wedding for a variety of reasons, but my own feeling about that particular potential marriage is not satisfied. And in order for me to feel good about officiating that service, I often will work with a couple to get to the place where either we can do that service, or I just absolutely will not do the service because I don't feel good about that. So we are not required to marry anyone just because we're the pastor of the church. So this is a serious kind of decision that you will take when you officiate a service, when you decide to do that or not. It goes on to talk a little bit about the responsibilities and duties of those who are licensed for pastoral ministry. If you are not an elder, if you are a licensed local pastor, there will be some unique pieces of that. You can find that in the 300s section of the Book of Discipline. Provisional elders are approved annually by the Board of Ministry. Local pastors are approved annually by a district committee on ordained ministry, and may be licensed by the bishop to do and perform the duties of a pastor. It is important to know that just because you have attended licensing school and maybe passed licensing school does not give you the authority to officiate a wedding as a local pastor. You must be under appointment by the bishop in order to exercise this. And you can only officiate weddings of people who are under your pastoral leadership. It's really important to keep that in mind, because as licensed local pastors, we are not given the authority to just do weddings wherever and whenever we want to. It has to be for people under your pastoral leadership or authority. So that can be a member of your church, it can be somebody who regularly attends your church, someone who's a part of your local church community, and that's really important to keep in mind. We talked a little bit about the servant of the state piece. Every state kind of has its own different laws and rules about who can officiate weddings. And I will speak only for the state of Ohio because that's what I know best. And in the state of Ohio, in order to officiate a wedding, you are required to be registered with the Secretary of State of the state of Ohio. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, you can go on the website for the Ohio Secretary of State, and there is a section that will help you know what you need in order to be affirmed and to get a license to be able to officiate weddings. So as I've said before, that the decision to perform a ceremony is the right and the responsibility of the pastor. And that has to be in accordance to the laws of the state and the laws of the United Methodist Church. So all plans, all service, wedding service plans and preparations must be approved by you, by the pastor. It's not approved by a wedding coordinator. It's not approved by somebody on your staff. It's not approved by anyone other than you. You are responsible for the content and the execution of the service itself. We talk a little bit about one of the responsibilities to be due counsel with the parties prior to marriage. Now, in the United Methodist Church, counsel or preparation for marriage is not something that we can think about doing. It is actually mandated by the United Methodist Church. And in addition to premarital preparation or counseling, you will have a role in discussing and planning a service with the couple and informing them of the policies or guidelines that have been established in your congregation and the United Methodist Church. Things in your congregation might be things like decorations, photography, recording, all that kind of stuff. And any leadership role taken by other clergy. Sometimes a couple will come to you and say, hey, I have a special friend who is a pastor. I'd love for them to participate. Remember, you are in charge, and that person would be invited by you, and you would determine what their role in that service is. I'm going to unpack a lot of this a little bit more here in just a moment. One of the questions I often get over the years as I have been teaching this module is, will you perform and officiate at weddings of persons who are not members of your church? And there are a number of churches that have in their wedding policy that they will only marry members. And our own wedding policy has that to a certain extent. But here's the thing that I have found over lots of years of officiating weddings, is that I find that weddings are a great evangelistic opportunity. And so often couples will come to the church and ask me to be married just because they're looking for a venue and a pastor. They have no other reason to be there other than they want to get married in a beautiful church sanctuary. And, I will take on those weddings. And what I hope that happens is in my time of preparation with them, in my relationship that grows with them, it is a really great opportunity to talk about what it means to include faith as a part of their wedding. And I will say that over the years, I've had some really great success in helping couples who had no church connection, no desire to be connected to the Christian faith, actually become active and engaged participants in the life of the church and become Jesus followers. Now, I wish I could tell you that happened 100% of the time. It didn't. But in a lot of those cases, it was a great evangelistic opportunity. You just have to kind of weigh that and balance that with what your role as a local pastor is and the weddings that you can perform. I would say that part of our wedding policy is that people actually engage in worship during the time of their preparation and begin to fall under the pastoral leadership of you. And that's one of the ways that you can reach out to folks beyond just those who are in your congregation. So that's just a little bit of an introduction, some things to think about as you begin to conceive your role as pastor and lead and officiate weddings. We're now going to turn to kind of 4 stages of wedding preparation. These are 4 primary stages. These are kind of the things that you will walk through as you work with a couple, as you oversee and administer the Christian marriage, the wedding for them. And I'll just give you those 4 and then we'll dive into each one. The first one is premarital counseling. Now, that's what we've always called it, premarital counseling. But what I have begun to call it more recently in the last number of years is premarital preparation. I don't know what it is about the word counseling that freaks people out a little bit when they're thinking about their wedding. But thinking about it as preparation is something that has been useful to me. So premarital counseling or preparation is the first stage. The second stage is planning a wedding service. Remember, it's a worship service. Keep that in context as you work with couples, and I'll have some resources that will help you there. The third stage is logistics. The facility in which you are officiating the service and doing the rehearsal. I will make the case for the rehearsal being probably one of the most important parts of preparing for a wedding service. I mean, at the end of the day, if you can get through a successful rehearsal, your wedding the next day or whenever it is going to be will also be successful. And one of the things that really helps for a successful wedding is for you as pastor to lead a rehearsal with confidence and helping the couple recognize that you really do know what you're doing, and that you will provide the kind of leadership that can put their minds and their hearts at ease when they come to the service the next day. And then, of course, the fourth stage is the actual wedding service itself. And so I'm going to pause this video at this point so that if you need to take a moment to refresh or get ready for the next part, you can do that. I'll see you in the next video.